Transgender children seems like a political issue when it really should not be. The data does not show that sex change surgeries or dangerous medicine or social transition helps at all with gender dysphoria. In fact, there is a lot of data showing that it does harm children, period. So, why is this presented as such a divisive issue, liberal versus conservative, when really it shouldn't be? Well, a new guidebook was developed by liberal Democrat parents to show one another that social transition can be harmful to kids. It's called An Urgent Conversation: What to Know About Children, Gender, and School Policy. One of the guide's creators, Natalia Marakver, founder of the nonprofit Restore Childhood, joins us today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So your guidebook shows how the federal government is pushing parents to transition children as sort of a kindness or a progressive policy. No one, of course, wants to be bigoted or closed-minded. So is that why you wrote this, in order to say, like, hey, this is not politics, it's children we're talking about? Can you explain your motivation?
Sure. So Restore Childhood formed during the COVID mandates, and we really wanted to look at the evidence behind many of the mitigations that children were subjected to. And we organized something called Urgency of Normal, which was written by a virologist out on the Bay, on the East Bay, excuse me, on the Bay, San Francisco area, about what the evidence looked like for masking and vaccine mandates and social distancing in schools versus the mental health pandemic. And we really believed at the time, which we still do, if parents had access to data and to things presented simply rather than politicization, children would be able to go free, sooner. And in fact, that toolkit was very helpful to parents. Parents had reached out to us and said, we saw statistics here, there, we saw reports on the left, the right, mainstream media, et cetera, but nobody had collected it in one place where we could actually use it, bring it to like policymakers or principals or school boards, and actually enact changes for our children. Same here. This issue has become so politicized. There are many activists on both sides of the spectrum. We wanted to look at what the science, what the data said. And, just a few months ago, the CAS review just came out in the UK, where a very respected pediatrician looked at the studies on transgender health and found that the science really wasn't saying that this was the answer for children, and that suicide was always about more than just one thing. So all the fear mongering that parents, especially in this country, have been subjected to for the last few years, we really wanted to kind of shrink it down and say, here's what the science says, here's what you can do, here's how you can talk to your children.
Right, because if you are someone who wants to be compassionate and you want to be accepting, you think, oh, okay, we should give children anything they want. We should let them, change their bodies. Or why has that become a co-opted part of the conversation, where if you don't believe in those things, you are called names like a bigot or extreme right-winger?
That's a great question. I was one of the open schools parents here in New York City. I'm still a registered liberal Democrat, and I was at one of the very first rallies to reopen schools. And I cannot tell you how shocking it was to suddenly be called white supremacists and racist for wanting to reopen schools. We were called Trumpers, right wingers, racist, white supremacists. It didn't matter, what our constituency looked like, what our political affiliations were. It just became weaponized. So I don't really understand. I think this is a really dangerous tactic, and it needs to stop.
Right. And so what you present here, I think, is really interesting. You talk about how this is not actually a partisan issue. You have charts here showing that most people agree that you should not medically transition children or put children on puberty blockers or allow children to have surgery that changes their bodies. Only over close to 80% of people agree on that. And so talk to us about how important it is to start with our commonalities.
Well, I think that The toolkit is really meant to bridge that divide, right? I mean, we need to understand what each of the terms means. We made sure to include a glossary. I think that these words are scary and they're charged and they're weaponized. So I think that's the first step, is to start speaking the same language and accept that most people are really in the middle. Having conversations at the playground with other parents, engaging your child's teacher or your administrator, even in the bluest of blue areas, is not something you can't do. Like, I think that there's been an incredible chilling of speech in this country and actually internationally as well.
Yeah.
So I think we need to kind of take it back and realize that in real life, when we have real conversations, we can make real progress and come to real solutions, because most people do care about children. It's in this, stratosphere online where it seems like it's up in the air.
Right. Now, something that you point out here, this was new to me, that some say that the psychological intervention is iatronic, meaning the invention creates the condition. Now, this was something that early on people were canceled for saying that it is a self-fulfilling prophecy, or that there was an element of social contagion. So explain this word, if you will, iatronic, and how we're actually see it play out for children in schools.
I think it's iatrogenic.
Sorry,
If I'm correct,
iatrogenic. My
iatrogenic.
apologies. Yep,
No,
that's
no,
okay.
not at all.
It's
Abigail
new to
Fryer.
me.
No, it's new to me too, and I actually love it. I feel like I use it so often now. And I think what it means is that the cure kind of, is worse than the original disease. Like, it can create the
Hmm.
condition. Abigail Schreier talks about it in her book, Bad Therapy. She has like a whole chapter on this. And I think it's about, the social contagion phenomenon, like embedding ideas in children's and adults' heads that were never even there. When you start questioning things that you kind of thought were your bedrock, like, I'm a girl, I'm a boy. Well, what were you, what are you really? I remember, I mean, I think this was really interesting. I have a friend whose son went to a very progressive middle school, and he came home. He was in sixth grade. This was a couple of years ago during the school, just reopenings. And he said to his mom, they're talking about a lot of things in school, and they say I'm not really a boy or a girl. Maybe I'm a car. And she was just like, oh my God. Like, I remember
Right.
reading that, in a chat, and I was like, how are we creating these ideas? Like, we're these young, impressionable minds, I mean, if a boy wants to, dress like a girl or put on nail polish, what's the big deal? That's not, an irreversible damage. Like, you can take off a dress, you can take off nail polish, you can, cut your hair if it's long, but these harms are irreversible. And I think that's what we're talking about here.
Right. And my opinion is that that's more bigoted to tell a boy that if he wants to wear nail polish or a dress, he must not be a boy. Well, that is bigoted towards the very idea of a boy, because why cannot social performance involve nail polish for a boy? What's so wrong with that? Something that I really like here, you talk about FERPA and parental rights, and you talk about how activists have co opted these rights to say, well, the rights really are with the children and not the parents. But you say that's not true. So tell me exactly how that has happened, and what are parents' rights?
Well, parents have the right to protect their children's privacy, but now that's being weaponized by schools keeping secrets from parents. And on some level, like, some of the administrators who don't even agree with this kind of activation and this division between parents and children, because they know it also makes their lives more difficult, will not have a choice if there's legislation and school laws that prohibit them from sharing, whether it's their child's pronouns or whatever. So parents need to read the FERPA laws. They need to understand what their rights are. They are the guardians, and they need to be able to approach their schools and their administrators and explain to them, walk them through it, and explain to them and assert that they have the rights for their children.
So this is a free download, this kit. And again, it's not necessarily for parents, because you say that gender dysphoria is highly related to parents who are dealing with other mental issue comorbidities. But it's a lot for conversations within school districts, within communities, right? Is that more your intention here, or maybe it is for
So
everybody?
I think it is for everybody. I think that there are the parents who are aware that this is a problem and are struggling to find data to support what they believe is the right course of action, which is not to immediately affirm and transition children. So that for them, this is that resource. Then there are the parents, and I think this is the bigger struggle is how to access this audience. But there are the parents who don't understand or don't know how things have changed. I call it, the parents who don't realize like the food system has changed and they're like, I drank milk. Why do we need to do organic for little kids now? It's like, well,
Right.
milk
Yeah.
30 years ago was a little different than it is now. The school situation and the way that your kids are being constantly probed with questionnaires and social emotional learning, that's changed too. So for those parents, it's kind of like a wake up call like, hey guys, this has changed. You should pay attention. You should discuss this with your kids and then bring it to your administrator, bring it to your pediatrician. Pediatricians often don't know, right? So, I've spoken to a pediatrician who said in 30 years of practice, she never had one child who transitioned, and in the last year, she had six.
Yeah.
So, we can't expect pediatricians to be experts in everything. This is something they can look at and then they can investigate and advise their patients correctly.
Right. Well, again, it's a free download. You can find it at gendertoolkit.com. And I hope you do. I hope it provides a lot of great conversations around well intentioned parents, which I think most of us are without the political capture. So thank you so much for coming on Redacted. I hope you come on another time and tell us about this important work. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
So nice. Thank you.